Welcome to Mind Your Heart Podcast, your favorite corner of the internet where we chat about all things mental health. I'm Emily.
And I'm Trina. Together, we're like your real-life Lorelai and Rory Gilmore. Each week, we'll bring you real conversations about the world of mental health, and we will peel back layers on topics like anxiety, depression, and much more.
We're here to chat with you about the tough stuff, the everyday stuff, and everything in between. So grab your emotional support water bottle, I know we have ours, find your comfiest chair, or keep your eyes on the road, and let's get into it. Are you ready, Mom?
Absolutely. Join us as we mind our hearts and hopefully make minding yours a little easier.
Hi. Welcome back to the Mind Your Heart podcast.
Welcome back.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
September 30th.
All right. Yes, Monday, September 30th.
Yeah.
I'm Trina.
I'm Emily.
And we're excited to mind your heart. Actually, this is a hard episode.
Yeah. So a little bit of a trigger warning. Well, not a little bit. A trigger warning. If like gun violence and I guess like deaths, school shootings, that's what we're talking about, is school shootings. So if that is not something that you feel that you have the capacity to listen to, then go ahead and skip this episode. Yeah. But first we'll start out.
Yeah, light.
Yeah, just
so we'll start out light.
Yeah.
We'll talk about, I don't necessarily know if we have to talk about highs and lows, but
No.
I think we can talk about just what's going on. So we're discussing podcasts currently and podcasts that we like, and Emily was telling me about a new podcast that she listens to.
Yeah. Well, it's because I have a newfound obsession with Andy Samberg. I think he's just so funny. And I recently started watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and that was when I was like, I love Andy Samberg. And then I just started watching all the things, like all of the digital shorts he's in and SNL, and like Hot Rod, which is like the stupidest movie ever, but like he's funny. So but like the podcast that I'm listening to is called The Lonely Island and Seth Meyers podcast. So it's like the guys from The Lonely Island from SNL, and they're just discussing like digital shorts that they did in SNL. And I think it's funny because Andy Samberg like hates being on a podcast. Like he like does not want to do a podcast. Like they're all like, you like shut up and just like be here, like and he's like, it's just stupid, like we just need to go outside. And so the other guys are like, you don't even go outside, like what are you talking about? And he's like, well, I think it's just whatever. And then Seth Meyers has his own podcast that is like guest based, and Seth and Andy are like really good friends. And Seth's like, well, Andy, like, I haven't asked you to be on my podcast. And Andy's like, because you're being polite? And Seth is like, no, because I'm just trying to be a bro. Like, I'm trying not to force you to do another one
that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny.
But it's funny.
Yeah. And I was complaining because I'm a shorty. Life is Short with Justin Long. Yeah, Justin and Christian Long. And I don't know where they are. They've like just disappeared. They didn't even say goodbye. And it's been repeat after repeat after repeat. And I'm like, where are they? And so they have Life is Short and then Life is Shorter. And I'm like, I'm very upset. I don't know where they are. I think I posted on their Instagram thing. No one responded. And other people have said it too. So I don't know what's I don't know what's happening. Yep. So anyway, so that's one thing that's going on. And then another favorite podcast of mine, Smartless, they moved to, what is it? Is it Sirius XM? Yeah, they moved from Wondery, and I was like, all right, so lots of shaking up happenings in podcast world. But I have to say, because what is this, September 30th?
Yeah,
we're recording this September 21st, I think it is. Yeah, we're a little behind schedule, so September 21st, and I started watching the Golden Bachelorette, and it's so good. Like, it's so much better than the regular Bachelor and Bachelorette because these people are like, nobody cares about their Instagram following at the age of 65. And then, so it's like,
you never know.
Well, yeah, but they just seem, I mean, there might be a few, but they just seem so, I don't know, like they've lived life's experiences. I cried on the first episode like 6 times. It was multiple times. And
That's a very specific count of times.
It was a lot of times. I was like, what's happening? It was just all these like sweet stories and these guys that are not afraid to be vulnerable because, they're older and they just can cry easier. And it's just kind of refreshing.
Yeah.
And then Joan, like you're rooting for her because she's, she was on the Golden Bachelor and she was like a fan favorite. And then she decided to leave because her daughter had a baby and was having some postpartum. And you're like, well, she's a great person because she's, family first.
Yeah.
And now you just, and she was like, she had a great love. And so you're like, oh, Joan, I don't know. I really am enjoying it. So hopefully I feel this way when this podcast comes out because it was a good start. Yeah.
When this podcast comes out?
When ours comes out.
Oh, about The Bachelor.
Yeah,
I thought you were saying that about our podcast. I was like, you don't already like this podcast? I'm confused.
I listen to our podcast. It's you that doesn't listen to our podcast.
Okay, well, I listen to it live.
Yeah, well, that doesn't count.
What?
Yeah.
Why doesn't that count?
Because it doesn't. You have to reflect.
I have discussed this with people, and they say that listening to it live does count.
It doesn't count, though, because you don't know how you sound in the microphone. You don't know what you're doing on the camera.
I don't want to know.
All right. Well, then you don't want to grow, I guess. Apparently, you just want to stay in one box. Which does not sound like you. So,
yeah, you're silly. No, that's not true. I just don't want to listen to myself. I don't like listening to myself talk.
Yeah, that's sad, though.
Why?
I don't know. Anyway, I think you should check it out.
I'm not going to.
All right. Well, we want you to continue to check it out, even though Emily's stubborn as a mule.
Okay. And I get it from you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
All right. So that's what's happening. So now we can move into some more serious things.
Yeah.
And, this is an upsetting topic for me. Like, I'm really sick of this happening in our country. I think it's very upsetting. As of September 19th, 2024, there's been 50 school shootings. That's outrageous. We just had one that was more recent in Georgia and where several people were killed. And this was a 14-year-old who had an assault rifle and also was questioned the year prior to this over some tips about school shootings, he and his father. And I just feel like, what are we doing in this situation? Like, this is outrageous that this is happening and that, teachers don't want, and that's one thing. Like, some people's solution to this problem is to arm teachers, which I think is absolutely asinine. I can't even imagine walking around my classroom with 7-year-olds with a gun. That sounds completely outrageous to me. And it doesn't feel like a solution. So I think there's like a variety of problems here, one of which I don't think 14-year-olds should have any access to an assault rifle.
Yeah.
That's part of it. I don't even think assault rifle. Why do we even need assault rifles in the first place? And then, so I have an issue with that. And I do have an issue, and people are like, don't take my guns. I have my right to my guns. And I understand that is your right. And that I may or may not disagree with people having guns. But what I do understand is that we also have a right to our kids being safe at school. And so the rights of a gun bearer is superseding the rights of children. And it's like, and I'm like, you have violated rights in other laws that have happened.
Yeah.
And so I just feel this is my solution. And this is not taking guns away from people. This is allowing people to keep their guns, but this is the solution. I heard this, a woman, she's a veteran, and she posted on a place on Instagram. And this was a thing that she said, and I thought this makes perfect sense. And she said that she thought that in the Army, she was in the Army, and that the Army does a really good job of this. She's like, the Army prioritizes the soldiers, the lives of the soldiers. That comes first over the weapons. Hello? That sounds like a great solution. Yeah. And that every soldier, when they are given a gun, the gun is associated with their social security number. So it is tied to their social security number. As long as they have the gun, it's tied to them. They also have to have the proper training. that makes sense. And they also are held responsible and liable for the control of their weapon. So their weapon must be secured. So if somehow someone else gets a hold of their weapon and murders someone, they too are held responsible because they did not secure their weapon.
Yeah.
I think this would eliminate so many if this was the case, if people had to have their guns tied to their social security number, they could still have their guns. But it's their responsibility to make sure that somebody doesn't break in and take their weapon and kill someone. So it is their responsibility. And if you feel like you must have a gun, then that's what you are agreeing to. So that's what I think. I think that I think we should follow that, because then people would get what they needed. They would be able to keep their guns if they, wanted to keep their gun. And then they would also be held responsible if somebody is murdered because of their gun. So that's one of the things that I think is a solution. And I will let you talk because I'm like kind of enraged. Oh, I feel enraged.
Yeah.
Because our children are going to school and being murdered. And our teachers did not sign up to be law enforcement. They did not sign up to be, they're not in the military. They're not in combat. And also when people are in combat, they get paid a lot more money. So, and that's another thing. Like, you want teachers to carry weapons, then you better be paying them a completely different amount than you're paying them. And I'm sorry, one guarded person in the school. And let me just tell you the impact that is having on the mental health of our children.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not helpful.
No, these active shooter drills have scarred kids for life. That's the normal part of our children's lives. That to me is insane.
Yeah.
I thought it was bad enough having hurricane drills because it was scary and kids would cry.
I remember crying with tornado drills.
Yes.
And we don't even really get
that's
tornadoes.
what I meant, tornadoes.
In here.
Yeah.
And I remember vividly how scared I was when I was in 3rd grade. I literally sobbed on the floor.
Because it's upsetting and scary. And now we're in a room in a triangular area where people can't see in the windows or whatever, pretending there's an active shooter outside. That's terrifying for kids.
Yeah.
It's so, and that has become our normal part of our lives. I don't know how we got to this point. And the amount it's just increased since COVID. And it's just there was 3 children in my school district arrested just this week for making threats. Now they're going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law because they have to take this so seriously. This is an 11-year-old. An 11-year-old. Do you know, nobody knows what they're doing when they're 11. But also, what in the world? It's upsetting. Also, I feel like another solution is we have to pay attention to what's going on with these kids. They act like, like in this particular case, this boy, had been tracked already by the FBI, but nothing could happen. And that's the thing, is that schools' hands are so tied and they don't have the resources for this.
Yeah.
We had a student in my school when I was the student support specialist, and I mean, he was blowing up lizards. And he was doing things that were very scary. And I remember saying to the principal, like, this is could be a potential problem in the future. He's got some warning signs that are really frightening.
Is this the kid that brought needles to school?
Oh, that was a totally different kid. But there's the kid that brought needles was like diabetic. So he
left a bunch of needles.
He did not handle them wisely.
Okay.
He was also 7.
Okay.
So he didn't handle them wisely.
All I remember was being very afraid of needles at that time.
But he did not handle that well, and I actually was not there. I had a substitute. But he didn't handle that well, but he was 7 years old and he was diabetic, so he actually had a reason. He didn't just bring needles.
All right.
But the person I'm thinking of, and this is a combination of students, so it's not any one student. It's just a variety of different things that have happened. And there was only so much you could do. Like, you kept documents, you tried interventions, you did all these things, but there's like only so much that you can do as a school. And so what do you do in these situations? I mean, this person needed help. And when the family is not on board, it's very difficult to get help especially when the family's not on board. And the family wasn't on board. And I also think, like, sometimes these parents, they need to be held accountable as well.
Yeah.
Like if like it's partly, I mean, it's partly up to you as well. If somebody calls me about my child threatening to shoot another person, like that would be something that I would take very seriously.
Yeah.
I just
I don't know
even
that I would let my child go back to school.
I don't think so either. Also, I would think that was a huge cry for help.
Yeah,
Like
I would be
like
like, you
they're
need to
in
be
some kind
immediately
of
in some, you need to have some testing with
yeah,
psychiatry
yeah,
and all
yeah.
that kind of
We need to figure out what's
psychology.
going on
Yeah.
because this is a serious
Mm-hmm.
situation and very scary. And I don't know what the answer is when it comes to that. But what I do know, and I think there's a lot to it. I also think that schools don't feel necessarily like safe places for kids besides this
Yeah.
situation. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it doesn't feel safe for some kids just in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are things that have all played into this. I don't think it's just out of nowhere we have people acting violent. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that's happening out of nowhere. I mean, some people blame it on social media. I think there might be some merit to that. I think things have become like really common to see. Like we've become kind of numb to such extreme violence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really upsetting. And also like people having their whole lives on video is can also be like another thing that's causing upsetting situations. But it's just like we have to do something. Like something we have to take this as like how many more times do we need this to happen?
Yeah.
I just feel like I don't know. It just feels so unbelievable to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go both ways. Like my friend who was in a school, or she's not working there, but her child was in the school where one of the students was arrested this past week. She was like, they need to have the full extent of the law, and she was like ranting and raving. And I was like, I agree with you. We have to take it seriously. But on the other hand, I'm like, what does an 11-year-old know? Like, how much does an 11? I know that they understand not to kill. Like
Yeah.
I do I mean, my 7-year-olds understood not to
Mm-hmm.
kill. But also I'm like,
Their mind is not fully
their mind is
developed,
not.
and
Yeah.
like the responsibility is not solely on the child because they are not classified as an adult.
Yeah.
Like they're classified as somebody who is not developed all the way
Yeah.
yet. And like the person that is responsible for the well-being and safety of their development is the parent.
Yeah. So I think that
Or
the
guardian.
parent needs to be held responsible. I I think that they need to play a part in it. I want to share some statistics because it's really it's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable thing. So then the thing that I think is another like shocking, like the fact that it keeps getting worse, like that it's growing,
Mm-hmm.
like it's gone up from since 2021 and then 22 and 23 and all setting records since at least 2008. There was 83 or 82 incidents in 2023 and one of the deadliest was in 2022. It's just unbelievable. And
Mm-hmm.
then the thing that I think is interesting is that it is almost every state, but there are, I think, 5 states. Yep, 5 states that have not had any school shootings since 2008,
What are the states?
according to CNN's analysis. Like I will say my source is CNN in this case. I have like cross-checked it, but CNN is the place that I'm on currently. But the states that have not had school shootings, I know one of them is Vermont and New Hampshire. Those are 2 of them. And then I can't find where the other ones are. I should know what this state is. But just looking at the map, I don't. Oh, here we go. Montana and Wyoming. Montana, Wyoming, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Rhode Island have had no school shootings in this period since 2008. So, that's interesting. I wonder
what
why.
are they doing?
Yeah, what are they doing? I'm curious what their gun laws are in those states. I'm also curious their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know if they're doing anything different in their school system. Like, are kids happier at school? Do they, are like, what are the things that we can figure out in order to like replicate that? Maybe we don't have to look at what everybody's doing wrong. Although the
what
worst,
are this? Yeah, I want to know what the worst. States.
Yeah, it doesn't say the worst states, but there's definitely a correlation to the South. Yep, the South and the Mid Atlantic. So the South and the Mid Atlantic have the most school shootings, but the which is interesting. Like, what is their, again, what I would ask the same questions. Like, what are their gun policies? What are their mental health states? How much help is available? And like what's going on in their schools. I know in schools in Florida in the South, we've got a lot of like over testing kids, where we have like increased the expectations on children. Have When I was teaching first grade, the content that they're teaching now, they're teaching that in kindergarten. They're teaching the content that I taught in first grade in kindergarten. Oof. So everything is, I mean, we've got kids taking algebra in seventh grade, sixth and seventh grade. So we've got middle schoolers taking high school classes. We've got high schoolers taking college classes. We've got elementary school kids, pushed into grades and 1 and 2 grade levels ahead of them. All of that pressure has to be part of the problem. Mm-hmm. All of this pressure, the lack of kids being able to play, the lack of kids being able to have recess, the fact that we've increased this pressure, all these factors I think these are all factors.
Yeah.
I can't find where it says the states with the highest, but I think it's really upsetting.
Yeah. I think the whole thing is like, it's devastating, like, to know. Also, the thing that I think is the part that frustrates me the most is that there are countries that this is not an issue.
Where it doesn't happen at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is, like, we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, we're doing something wrong.
So, like, I'm like, if we know that there are countries where this is like a non-issue at all, like they don't have active shooter drills because they aren't concerned about that, then like, what are they doing that we're not? And also, I guess I just feel like this is an issue with so many different layers to it. Like, it's not just like, I think there are some people who are on the extreme end of both ends that are like, don't take my guns, and then there are people like, all guns should go away forever. Like, I don't necessarily think that, like, looking at just the weapon is the only problem. Like, we're not paying attention to the environment.
I do agree with you. I don't think it's just about, that's why I thought the solution of having it tied to your social security number made sense, because it wasn't taking the guns away from everyone. And you're right. And people say that that's the weapon, that there's still a person behind the weapon that's actually committing the crime. And although I do think
but at the same time, like, if you don't have access,
then you're gonna let's say you grab a different weapon. A knife is not going to be able to kill multiple people at one time.
Yeah.
Because the child will be able to be overpowered.
Yeah.
So an adult can overpower that, whereas they can't necessarily overpower a gun.
Yeah.
So I think the weapon does make a difference in that case. And also an assault rifle. We're not even talking about...
For sure.
Yeah, we're talking about an assault rifle.
Yeah. No, I do think that I have a problem with... I'm not a fan of the freedom that we get with gun laws. Like, I don't know that I necessarily would say, like, I would just be like, abolish them all, but I do think that there needs to be much stricter gun laws. But I think there's just a lot with all of this. Like, it's like such a systemic issue from so many different angles. It's an issue from the aspect of, like, what is causing people to feel the need to do this?
Yeah.
And what is their home life like? What does their medical background look like? Are they being taken care of in that way? Because then I'm like, I also think, like, I'm like, when you think about it as like a broken down into the person, like, I'm like, there are so many things, like, in our world specifically that are like just slowly, like, killing us.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, even like the food that we're eating, like the environment, the air that we're breathing. And I'm like, to me, that's where I'm like, okay, well, I'm not shocked that it's more in the South, because I'm like, this sounds crazy, but I'm like, it's hot as hell. There's like people who are littering and doing all that more and more. It's more common down here than it is in northern states. So I'm like, the actual physical environment is a cause of problem on one's mental health. Then their mental health is not taken care of or looked at as serious enough of a problem to like take preventative measures. And then it's like, also for families who are like, okay, well, like, we're gonna be preventative, we're gonna do our best to like be outside and eat healthy and care for our whatever, then it's like, well, everything is so expensive. So access to quality mental health for kids who are, where it's like, okay, well, this person has something psychologically that's different. They don't have the means to get testing for that child. They don't have the means to go to experts and be like, what can I do to support them so that this doesn't go on the other end of really bad. And then it's like, then we're being in schools where everyone's unhappy. There's not a single portion of the school that there's somebody that's just completely joyful. Teachers are unhappy, students are unhappy, the custodians are unhappy, lunch people are unhappy, administration is unhappy, the school board is unhappy. Like, it's a chain of complete like dissatisfaction. And so you take all of those things into account.
It's a boiling pot.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. It's just waiting to happen. That makes a lot of sense.
So,
and also when you think about how many instances we have of even very young children. I have a friend specifically who has a kindergartner, or I don't know, first grade, second grade, or kindergarten, whatever, a young child who's having difficulty in school, who's like throwing things and, knocking down things and whatever, and doesn't, gets mad. And this is a very sweet, well-adjusted boy, very smart, who is like he's showing some disruptive signs, and the school's response is disappointing. But also I feel like they don't have the tools. They don't know. We were never taught how to deal with this type of behavior, and we're also not taking it for what it is, which is he's trying to tell us something, or he or she is trying to tell us something. Kids don't just have temper tantrums at those ages, 5 and 6 years old. They're beyond that developmental part of the life. But when something else is going on, when they are, and actually the behavior has been noticed to be worse when there was a heavy amount of testing. And so it's like, hello.
And the way that I think about it overall too is I'm like a lot of the times with these kinds of things, with school shootings, with the over-testing, with the just overall mental health crisis that we have, I'm like, people are focusing, it's like, this is how I can picture it, is like, you're trying to build a bed, but you didn't get all the pieces, and the tool that you have does not work for any of the screws. And also the company that sold you the bed doesn't sell the bed anymore. And the pieces of the bed are actually not the right ones that go together. It's for different kinds of beds. And you didn't even order that bed. You ordered a different one. And then we're only trying to fix the wrench. You can't start with the wrench. You don't have the right bed. The company's not selling that anymore. You don't have the right pieces. The person putting it together, that's not even what they signed up for. It's like broken trying to fix broken.
You don't have the right tools. You don't even, where do you start?
It's like a cycle of mess. So it's like, you're like, in my head, like I was talking to Jake about this because we were talking about like the political standpoint of it and like what our presidential candidates have talked about with this. And I'm like, it's so easy for them to get up there and say, I'm going to fix this, or I'm going to do this, when like, really, if we're really being truly honest with ourselves, the only way that we're going to fix this is by completely starting over.
Yeah. 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 We have such a broken system. The system is so broken in so many different ways. It needs a complete redo. A complete redo. It's like,
and that's the scary part.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
and we have a lot of families like saying, you know what, we're done with this system. I'm going to homeschool. The homeschool population has grown massively.
Yeah.
I remember when I had a child, and my goodness, I don't know, you might have even been like around this age. Actually, I know exactly how old they were because my friend's daughter was in my class and she is now a sophomore in college. So it was when she was a second grader. Mm-hmm. So I had a child who came in to second grade and he had been homeschooled. And I remember, like, this is so terrible. I felt judgmental. I was like, what do you mean you homeschooled? Do you also do at-home dentistry? Mm-hmm. Like, I remember feeling like you don't have the tools. Like, of course you, which is so ridiculous of me to think because parents we are the first teacher. Mm-hmm. Like we are the primary person that has impacted the child's learning, their security, their all the things.
But you were also, I would like to give you some credit there. You were in a scarcity system. So the idea of somebody like doing something and thinking that they could do it better than you was like, felt like an insult in a way.
Yeah.
But continue. Okay. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. So, I do remember feeling judgmental. But I loved that kid. Like that kid was like a sponge. He loved to learn. Like teaching him was like one of my favorite. It was like anything I said and he was just like, yes, give me more. It was so unbelievable. And I remember telling his mom, I'm like, he's so smart and he did have holes. Like there were gaps. He didn't like reading, so they didn't make him. Like, so he would struggle a little bit in that, but I turned that around. Yeah. And so, he was so good in math and science and things that he had liked.
Yeah.
And it was such an interesting year. I learned so much too. And they loved me. He loved me. I loved them. Like it was a really good situation, but also I wasn't a traditional classroom. I had iPads. We had one-to-one iPads. I was using technology. Like I was doing different kinds of things for kids to learn. Mm-hmm. And so he thrived in my classroom. She pulled him right back out of public school in third grade. And I remember being like, oh man. And I think I talked to her about it because she's like, you were what we like dreamed of.
You were the exception to the rule.
This is what we hoped for him. Mm-hmm. But then she's like, but it wasn't like that. And I remember being really sad about that.
Yeah.
But so families are taking it into their own hands. And some parents are like overwhelmed with that. Like, what are they going to, I mean, honestly, I would have been teaching Jackson was so difficult. Mm-hmm. Like it's something I was really good at, which was teaching reading. And he was like, what are you doing? And so it was not fun to teach my own child. So there's like some struggles with that as well, but it's understandable that parents are feeling like this.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want to send either one of you, actually, your experience was another factor in me being upset with the system.
Yeah.
Was watching what happened to both of you.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have experienced that from a parent perspective, seeing your child or children having a hard time in a system and not being celebrated for who they are and being labeled or being like any of the things that have gone wrong, bullying, all those things, you get angry at the system. Mm-hmm. You're like, what? And it felt worse to me because I'm like, I dedicated my life to this place, to this system, to this job, to these children.
Yeah.
And why are other people...
This is what you give me back.
And this is what you did to my kids.
Yeah.
And so it is so hurtful. So I understand why people are homeschooling. I understand.
And it is really successful for some.
It really is. And also there's a lot of fear, like in lies that they tell you in systems. Things like, you have to go to college, you're not going to be successful. And I really like one of the candidates who openly speaks about that and talks about how important it is to make sure that we're recognizing that there are other paths and that you don't have to go to college. Yeah. And I was like, hallelujah to her.
Yeah.
So that, which might be a total turnoff to some people, but I don't even care.
Oh.
So I just feel like that one statement is a big deal to me.
Yeah.
And because I'm like, we don't have to tell people something that isn't true. And then the whole, you have to do this and you have to do that. I have a friend whose son has dyslexia and he has a difficult time, and he's in high school now, and he faces different obstacles, and she's like, she's constantly having to fight for him.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, we just have so much to go through, and she's like, I feel like we're walking through quicksand because it's so upsetting and frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you can simply stop.
High school is so hard.
Yeah. I'm like, you can simply go around that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they lie and say you need all these things, and then Jackson goes to college.
Yeah.
Like he didn't even get a high school diploma. He got a GED.
Yeah.
And he didn't have whatever kinds of test scores and whatever, and they didn't even care what his test score was.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's a lie that we all believe, that we're fed and believe, and the pressure that we put on our kids, and then that doesn't even matter. Now that doesn't mean he gets to go straight to like the school of his dreams.
Yeah.
But it's still
But he still got options.
He still has options.
And he could eventually go to UF if he wanted.
So it's like it's just
it just looks different.
It's just so, and I know we started with this with school shootings, but it's all intertwined.
Yeah, for sure. It's just a mess of it's just so broken.
It's so
broken. It's like
and our kids are suffering.
Yeah.
And our kids are acting out in these horrific ways.
And that's coming from fear.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's so scary. I remember when I was in high school and there was somebody, there wasn't somebody, like, actively in the school, but there was, like, a bank robbery by the bank that was, like, literally right across the street. Like, we would walk there after school for parents to pick up there. And the guy, like, had a gun, and he was, like, running up and down the street or whatever, and we had to be on lockdown, but we didn't know, like, what was going on. And I was so scared. Like, it was, like...
I don't even remember this. That's the crazy part.
It was, like, one of the scariest things. And they had told us, like, at that time, they were like, okay, well, when this stuff happens, like, nobody's allowed to go on their phone because, like, people can, like, track, like, where this is. So I was like, okay, like, I can't, like, do anything like that. Like,
the thing is that most of the time, these situations have been, but they're not tracking anything.
Yeah.
These are kids, kids shooting kids.
Yeah.
This isn't the high espionage. They're all tracking whatever. This isn't.
Yeah.
This isn't even. These aren't even acts of terrorism. This is an act of a child shooting other children.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that's so upset. So then you can't get. My friend's daughter, they were making texts to their parents to say goodbye, ready to send if they needed to. This just happened, like just 2 weeks ago. That's crazy. Isn't that crazy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the school, Riverview High School, they just had this happen, and then another one of our friends' kids who's in high school had like a lockdown because there was a kid who was threatening, and like we had messaged them after and is their son okay? Yeah. Like, are your family okay? And they were like, yeah, it was definitely like we're shaken up, but like everybody's like okay and safe. Yeah.
It's I remember having a lockdown with the same thing. It was like a bank robbery, and the person was loose in the school that I was in. And we were in a lockdown, and I had 2 classes of kindergartners that I had to keep quiet, which was impossible.
Yeah.
And so they literally, a few of them started running in between the bookshelves, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And the other thing is like, what am I going to, if I yell at them and tell them I'm going to scare them to death.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to scare them. But if there's someone in our school, then we're sitting ducks. You kind of are anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, whether you're being quiet or not, because the things that they teach you are so stupid anyway. Yeah. That you really should try to get out.
That's what I had the only teacher that I ever had, who thought that. It was when I had PE year. It was called Hope. I was like a required class that you had to take in high school, and we were on a downstairs like classroom, and I remember like him saying to us, he was like, if there's ever this situation that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, my priority is not that we follow the rules. It's that, like, all of our lives are protected.
Yeah.
He's like, your life is important to me.
Hmm.
And he was like, I have a rock sitting by the window that I'll use to break the window, and I'll make sure that, like, everybody can climb out, and you run as far as you possibly can until you find somewhere that you can like call the police. And he was like, don't stop running until you get somewhere safe.
Because moving targets are harder to hit.
Yeah. And because we were at the back of the building, so if you ran, you could go through the woods into like Palmetto, basically. And he was like, don't look back, just keep running. Like, that's what we'll do. He's like, we will not sit here and wait for somebody to come. Yeah. He's like, I will break the glass and we will go. And that was like the only time where I was like, I actually felt like safe to be. I was like, I hope if this does happen, I'm in his class. Yeah. Because I'm like, I know we would get out. Yeah. Because then, like, I had other teachers who were like, I mean, they obviously, of course, wanted to do the best they could. And they're like, I would risk my life for you guys. But I'm like, but then, like, then what? Then what? Then you're dead, and then we're next. Yeah. So it's like,
no, it's like, what? I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the answer is, because yeah, you would want the teacher that's like, we're going to get out. We're going to try to get out. Mm-hmm. Like, we're going to try. I mean, and I used to feel like locking the doors felt so stupid to me. It was such a hassle. But in this case, in this situation in Georgia, that boy came back to his class with the gun and knocked on the door, and another student got up, saw the gun, and didn't let him in, thank goodness. And then he went and shot across the hall. So they were safe because the door was locked. Yeah. And so I think about that, and I'm like, well, in that case, like, who cares if you have to keep getting up and down, unlocking the door? The fact is that saved their lives. Yeah. But it's like...
But also, we shouldn't be in the position to where a locked door is saving a child's life.
No, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. And that's and that has to be your regular existence. Yeah. It's upsetting. It's an upsetting situation. And, yeah.
Yeah. And also, like, all the feelings that come along with this, whether you've experienced it, whether you've had a child that has experienced it, whether you've lost somebody to this, like, are all, like, completely valid feelings. Like, this is a very, like, complicated issue with lots of feelings and emotions that come along with it. So, like, being, like, gentle with yourself and with other people around you who are feeling things too is important, because it's not linear. It's just a mess. Yeah. And
your feelings, and no matter what they are, whether it's sadness or grief or anger, like mine is clearly coming out right now as anger. Mm-hmm. And it's okay. Yeah. To have your feelings. And it's also, something to think about, like, what we can do to contribute to make this better. Mm-hmm. Because it's just really unacceptable. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where we'll end. Yeah. For today. Thank you for listening to this heavy episode. And as we, like, go out, I would like to say, like, when we're in a position of, like, helplessness, like, when there's not, like, stuff that we can do to a large extent, the thing that we can do to create change is to put, like, goodness into the world. So, like, keep showing up for your children and loving them and showing them what love is, and being kind to other people, and, like, small acts like that does make a big difference in the long term. So when you sit here and we talk about this and you feel helpless and we feel helpless, like, the thing we can do to contribute to long-term change is to be the better in the world. So
that's a really good reminder.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder. It's, when I feel this, like, emotionally attached, it's hard to, like, stand back and look at how you can make it better. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a really good reminder.
Yeah. So we will see you next week on Mind Your Heart. Go walk outside and take a breath, because you need a break after this episode.
Yeah.